couple of my colleagues here, Charles and Alexis. We've been asked to get to know you a little bit. With that being said, can you start off and provide us with a brief background about yourself, maybe talk about some of the tools and technologies and frameworks that you've been most recently been leveraging?
Yeah, sure, definitely. I'll take an opportunity here to give you a very brief about me. I have 7 plus years of experience working with IT. I've been working on Java, J2EE, Spring, Spring Boot, and microservices. I really gain a good knowledge related to SQL and NoSQL databases as well. SQL, I have worked on MySQL and Oracle. And when it comes to NoSQL, particularly I have worked on Prometheus, Mongo kind of databases. As well, I have reviewed few other databases as well related to NoSQL. And when it comes to the web services, I have worked on REST and so web servers like WebLogic and Tomcat. We do follow TDD based approach of development. I'm very familiar with JUnit with Mockito. As well, we are working currently on migrating a monolithic applications to microservices. So really, I was excited to be part of this project here because I have good opportunity to work on the Spring and relative modules with the Spring Boot as an underlying framework as well, integrated Tomcat achieved with all different functionalities of the Spring. And also, we have implemented a couple of design patterns which where microservices are really concentrated at, like Saga design pattern for distributed tracing and CQRS for dividing the query and the response modules and handle them individually. So that was really great. That was really great situations which we have undergone to take up these decisions as well. Apart from this, we have implemented the design patterns like API gateway and circuit breaker to handle the fallback responses and the fault tolerance achievements, and to handle the single point, to remove the single point failure and ensure the proper reverse proxy systems through API gateway. This is what something which we have worked with. And apart from that, I do have a good knowledge related to working with the front end technologies as well, which comes like HTML, CSS, Angular, JavaScript, TypeScript. React is something very much prominent at React. I have really got good exposure, and Angular 2 I have enough than React as well. And moreover, I do have a good experience working with the DevOps tools as well. Starting with the GitHub, we have built a proper pipelining, GitLab, Bitbucket. So we have worked for SonarQube for code quality checks, Jenkins for pipelining, Docker for containerizing, and the Kubernetes is where we have deployed our services. And at last, we have been working on the 45 scan, Black Duck, to identify the different vulnerability checks or to achieve the security of our application as well. And I do have good exposure working with the different cloud environments with local clouds. Particularly, I worked with on-premises, which is built on Red Hat Linux boxes, and I do have a good exposure working with the AWS cloud as well, where we have migrated our application from the on-premises to the cloud, along with migrating from a monolithic application, which is working with the JSP servlet and Java 6 to the Java 8. And we have taken two migrations, 8 to 11 and 11 to 17 we have shifted. Right now, our application is working with the 17 version of Java. And also, we have nearly 80 microservices running in our application to make it completely successful. And actually, we follow domain-driven development to handle different domains, and we have different databases. So we have implemented Saga to have a distributed tracing, and the proper reportability matrix has been built with the help of Elasticsearch. Git Elasticsearch, where we have integrated with Kafka and integrated that with logback.xml with the help of Kafka appenders, and we have built a proper reporting on Kibana. And we have centralized the configuration where GitLab is centralized with the configuration stuff, and we achieved the centralization with the help of configuration server and the configuration client. This is what actually we have implemented in the local environment, and we continue the same sort of deployment onto the AWS environments as well.
Okay, great. So you mentioned migrating from Java 11 to Java 17. I'm assuming that was you were migrating a Spring Boot application. Is that correct?
Exactly.
Can you tell me some of the biggest obstacles that you had to address when you migrated from Java 11 to 17?
First we have done with a major thing like epsilon garbage collector. That is what actually we have started the first change to achieve the proper garbage collection. But we don't really see that level of implementational changes with epsilon. But when we started working with the Java 17 with the ZGC, we have really noticed a strange uh, performance when we have done that really implementation. And along with that, we have implemented shield classes because these are something as part of Java 15, but really implemented good in Java 17 changes, and that was really working well for us. And breakings we have not much seen, but one area we have there is a Notion JavaScript engine which has been utilized in Java 11 as well, but that was completely removed by Java 17. So we have to replace that. I mean, instead of replacement, we added it as a separate service to handle that particular requirements. And we have used records as well because records were not part of Java 11, which was introduced as part of Java 14, and we started using them in Java 17, but as we directly migrated. These are something which I have seen.
Okay. Um, what do you know? What major version of Spring Boot were you using? Were you using 3.0 or 2.0 or
Actually, we were in the 2.17 now. We were planning to migrate it to 3.0 is the last because we were actually expected to change to use the asynchronous synchronous communication in the similar fashion. So we see web clients are more suitable and more black duck issues has been reported over the Java 2.7, sorry, Spring Boot 2.17. The resolutions has been introduced as added as part of Spring Boot 3. So we're taking these different parameters at the security aspects. We plan to migrate to 3.0.
Okay. Yeah, because I know that Java 17 is not compatible with 2.0. Okay, let's get started. We will first start out with some Java questions. They'll probably we'll start out easy and get a little bit more in depth as we go on. After that, we'll probably talk some database questions and some. We'll probably touch upon some UI after that. Okay, so let's get started. Can you tell me what the differences are between an abstract class and an interface?
Interfaces are 100% abstract, where the abstract classes were not, because abstract classes contain both abstract methods and the concrete methods as well, which has a specific body implementation as well. And moreover, abstract classes has a constructor where that is not with the interfaces. And moreover, abstract classes can maintain the state of the variables, and where you cannot do the same thing with the help of these interfaces. And interfaces and abstract classes can be used for the similar functionality, but an abstract class can be extended by only one abstract class can be extended by the other, where implement one class can implement multiple interfaces.
Okay. Can you tell me what a functional interface is?
Functional interfaces contains only one abstract method to promote functional programming in Java. This has been introduced in Java 8. Before Java 8 as well, there are few functional interfaces, but from Java 8, they made this as a package and introduced under the package function, and that was really a great implementation because we're able to promote, use the functional approach. We're able to pass the method body dynamically through lambdas for these functional interfaces, and it also has multiple default and the static methods implemented. So to achieve the stability across the different class which are implementing multiple interfaces, that is a great thing which we achieve in functional interfaces.
Okay, great. Can you tell me what polymorphism is, and can you describe in what ways we can make methods polymorphic?
Sure. So basically, polymorphism is something which denotes many forms. There are two types: runtime polymorphism and the compile time polymorphism. Runtime says that will be implemented through overriding when we have a parent and the child classes, and it has the same method with the same return type and the same and different exception handlings based upon the rules. And when we call that specific method during the variable creation, based upon the availability of the variable, which the closest method will be selected. This kind of implementation is implemented or achieved through runtime polymorphism and denoted through at overriding. And overloading, it is a compile type polymorphism. In the same class, we have the different methods having the same signature, having the different parameters, either in terms of a length or different time terms of types of parameters. We'll be able to define this overloading.
Okay, great. Perfect. Can you tell me what generics are, and can you tell me why they're useful, and maybe give me a real-world example?
Generics are used in two different ways. One way I say, like, when we go with a collection, if you want to define a specific type has to be handled in your collection, we can use generics. And the second thing, when we are dealing with the different classes or methods, when you want to bring the generic nature to those classes, uh, I mean, it is agnostic to the different types of classes which comes there, that like parsing functionalities or any other. So if you pass a different class, based upon that class, that specific functionality has to be parsed. In such kind of things, you cannot say I'll be passing only this specific type of object. So in that areas, type references or these generics are really helpful. These are the two different implementational areas where we use generics very prominently.
Okay, great. Can you tell me what reflection is, and maybe tell me why it could be useful?
Reflections are used mostly during the time of testing or in the areas where you want to understand about your class features and different types, content of your class. So it's like to access the usually if you know the method name, you can directly call it. But without knowing the method name as well, you can call it. That can be done with the help of this particular this particular way. We will be able to call it. Else, it is not really straight possible without this.
Perfect. Okay. A couple more. Can you tell me what serialization is?
Serialization is the process of converting the data into a byte array. When we want to connect a data to the database, when you want to transfer the data to a Kafka kind of systems, you should be definitely serializing the data, which converts the data into an array and transfers it. And we reanalyzing the data, we call it as a deserialization. And during the serialization, we'll be giving an ID to ensure the data which is being serialized is in an acceptable format. And moreover, the serialization is something and marker interface which does not have any methods to be implemented.
Right. And if we had a serializable object and there was a transient field within it, can you tell me what that means?
I didn't get you. Could you please repeat that?
Can you tell me what a transient field within a serialized
See, transient
object
is something when you want to content to be serialized, want to convert a byte array, you just don't want that particular object or that particular variable to be serialized. You'll make it transient.
Okay, great. Can you tell me what synchronization is?
Synchronization is when multiple threads try to access your method. If you want to limit only one thread to be accessed at point, then you make it synchronized.
Okay. And there's a couple of different ways that we can synchronize our code. Can you name a few?
You can synchronize a method. You can synchronize a block as well. These are the two ways how you actually synchronize it.
Okay. In a runnable thread, there's two methods. There's a start method and a run method. Can you tell me what the difference is between the two?
It's always good to call the start method. Start method in the sense it creates a new thread and invokes that. But run method also invokes it, but it directly uses the main method for execution, and it does not create a new thread. There is no point you calling run and you say you're implementing run multi-threading.
Okay. I think that's all the questions I have for now. Alexis, want to ask any?
Yeah, sure. Okay, we will go for the simple one also, and then we can go in deep. What's the main difference between an object and a class?
An object is basically a blueprint of a class where it is having the real memory allocations available. And a class is something which contains the definition of an object, how an object is, what different variables it contains. And object is an instance of that particular class, we call it.
Okay, and what are static methods and variables?
Static methods are something which are directly accessible without creating the instance of the class, and they directly allocate the space, memory in the heap, and across all the different instance, you'll be having the same content for that particular static variables, and only the static variables are accessed inside the static methods.
Okay, and instance methods and instance variables?
Instance variables are instance methods, are called the methods which calls through the instance through the object, and they are also called the local. They are also called a class objects, where at a class level, once after you create an instance, then only they will be visible through that particular instance. That's the reason we call them as an instance. And with the help of class name, we cannot access them.
Okay, let us talk about collections. Can you tell me differences between array list and hash map?
Array list is basically a single value storage, and where if you come to a hash map, it's a key and a value pair storage. And array list is basically works on the dynamic array, and hash map works on the mechanism of hashing, linear probing, and equals implementation has been done very depth in it. It has two different types of collections used internally. One is a linker list, and other is a binary balance tree based upon the size of the hash map. And hash map does not follow the order of insertion unless it is a linked hash map, and the list follow the order of insertion.
And what about hash map and hash table?
Hash table is synchronized, where hash map is not synchronized. That's the only difference. And one more thing, hash map allow one null key, hash table doesn't.
Yeah, that was what I was looking for. Can you tell me what a final class is?
Final class is basically once that particular class is created, that class cannot be extended. The example of a final class is a string, and it is also immutable. But just making a class final doesn't make it immutable. There are certain steps to be taken care.
Okay, you're talking about immutable, right? Immutable object. What is the meaning of that? Sorry, if you didn't mention that. What is an immutable object?
Once the object is created, that cannot be disturbed through extending the class or changing the content of that particular variables of that class. This is what an immutability that can be achieved by making the variables as final, class as a final, and removing the setters, only getters, making a fully parameterized constructor. And if there are any mutable objects present inside that class, we'll be using the copy of it to set it, or copy of it to retrieve that value of it. But we will not be either setting or retrieving the direct object to that particular immutable class.
Okay. What a protected keyword means in Java?
The protected keyword actually has a step more visibility that can be accessed even outside the package, where the limitation is that particular class has to be extended it should be the child class of some class which is in the package.
Okay, let's go to the design pattern. Do you know what a singleton class is?
Yes, singleton, to ensure over a specific application, there is only one class which is inclined toward. That can be done by making a constructor as a private, and it is having the instance of it which is holding the instance of that particular class, and it should be static, and there should be a static method which actually handles if there is a null value at an instance, it will create new. object for that and assigns it and returns it. If not, it returns the existing variable. If by default, if you initialize it, it is by default comes as a single multi-threaded environment. And if not, you have to make that particular static method as synchronized and ensure it double checked in case of multi-threaded environment.
Okay. Can you describe a simple structure of classes and everything inside a Spring Boot application where you need to expose an API, you need to expose something like a get student name or something, whatever you want. But I would like to know the structure of the classes inside Spring Boot. You need to define one class that is going to receive the call, that's going to retrieve the information. Then you need to do another layer until you go to the database. Can you very briefly explain that structure inside an application?
Sure, definitely. Let me start with an object building. The dependencies, I'll be adding something like starting with Spring Data JPA, and I also use something Spring Web. Spring Web is one important feature which comes with an starter web is something comes with an dependency of running with a Tomcat, and the second one is something like Spring Data JPA and adds the database driver also as part of it. These were the three important things which need to be taken care. And as a second step, what we have to do is we should start writing, creating an something called a controller where we will be writing the start writing a REST controller, starting with an annotation of at REST controller at request mapping, define the domain name to it, and start writing a get mapping, which takes a variable if it is a if it is an particularly required variable as a mandatory, you use it as a path variable, and if it is not required, it may not be mandatory, use it as a query parameter, and you should be defining what is the producers as a result which we get with the JSON media type of it, and inside that we'll be returning the response entity object, what's the type of object we have to return, and we'll be in that particular class I'll be overriding I'll be overriding at request. I'll be overriding particularly the service class, and I'll be using that service class inside this method to be called to retrieve the data from the database in the first step. Now let's move to the service class. This is a service layer, which I'll be annotating that with at service. Inside that class, you'll be auto wiring with that repository. Let it be a student repository, and then I'll be writing a method with annotated with a transactional, and I'll be adding the code inside that to ensure the proper execution or calling that particular method of an interface to repository to return the user object and the type of the object as a response with a return type for that particular method. Now let's step into and ensuring that if there is any error, I throw an exception so that it will not complete the transaction during the retrieval. And moreover, during the time of providing the transaction annotation, I provide the level as serializable, isolation level as serializable, so that I will not be reading any phantom or the dirty reads. And now let's step into the third level, which is the third level, which is we call it as particularly the repository, which is an interface which contains the concept of it contains particularly the different concept of if I say an interface which extends the JPA repository, and I'll be using the student object and the object ID as a parameters to it, reference parameters to it. And I don't need to implement any additional functionality unless I want to add a query parameters to it. External query annotation or any JPEG will has to be implemented. Unless other than that, I will not be adding any other I'll not be writing any other methods, because everything would have implemented through JPA repository. Or if I go with something like a paging and sorting repository, I'll be using the pageable ID, and the different sort parameters will be passed as a parameters to the specific methods. Now let's step into the fourth layer, which is an entity object, the student object, where I'll be using an annotation at entity, at table, and at a column level I use ID. At other columns I use at column. If I want to use any kind of security to the checks to it, I'll use different at null, by length. All this kind of annotations will be used. This is all structure of the classes and different annotations used to expose a specific. And apart from that, at a property level, I need to provide the database properties to connect to the database. And I used to give the port which has to be exposed by the specific service to run as a service. And to monitor that, I will be adding activators as well.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you. Okay, well, taking advantage that you were talking about transaction. Do you know what a transaction is?
Yes, transaction is basically starts with the transaction begin and the process of execution of it, and at the end we'll be using the committing of the particular transaction. That's what actually we do in the transaction. Actually, transactional is an AOP, aspect-oriented programming, which has a certain step before and after execution of the specific method. At any stage, if an exception is thrown, that particular transaction will be rolled back, implementation will be executed.
Okay, do you have any idea or any documented design pattern that is used in the market to deal with the transactions in a microservices environment?
Saga design pattern is very good pattern which talks about the distributed transaction. Saga design pattern for microservices, which uses a centralized system called orchestrator to handle the transactions.
Yeah, that's correct. Okay, I have no more questions, Trevor.
Okay, Charles, do you have any follow-up questions before we move on to another topic?
Yeah, you worked in React and Angular.
Yes, I do have the exposure of both the things.
And why state management is important?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
So can you describe how state management works in React and Angular and why it's important?
Sure, definitely. Basically, in terms of the React, whatever it is, state is something to understand about the data which is present in the system. And this state can be managed at a component level. We can call it as a component state, because these React components can have their own local state, which actually allows to manage the data within the specific to the component. And there is a shared state as well, because in the larger application, which multiple components has been involved, they do share the state using the Redux, or they can use the props. Props are basically the immutable objects. And this is what something about the state, and just that is important to handle the data between the components and different stages of the data between them.
Okay, so if I want to change some data, would you rather do it in the UI or would you rather do it in an API?
I'll be using an API. If I want to retrieve some data from the backend, I use an API to retrieve the data. And if I want to change it within separate actions, I can use the state internally itself. For example, if I want to add a counter on every click, that kind of functionality also considered to be a state handler. I can also use the same thing, a state, by communicating to the backend and retrieving the data and updating the state. So I can do any type of operation I want.
Yeah. So, yeah, right. See, so in terms of producing code in software lifecycle, what's some important principles for you? What's one of the most important things?
Writing the code, I see solid principles really takes an importance, precedence to handle and give the better code. And 12 factors of microservices make sure the application to be very much stable and very good for the development as well. These are the two different factors I see at an application level, the solid principles, and the microservice level, the 12 different factors.
Right.
Do you want me to go through each and everything? I'm ready always.
No, that's good. I mean, I was looking for that kind of answer. It's fine. So you said you had in your resume you work in Docker containers. Why would you use a Docker container as opposed to just putting it on a server?
To build a stipulated environment which is required for that application to run without any obstacles of other services to be disturbing that particular application, either with the CPU memory utilizations, we'll be going with the Docker. So Docker is something which is limited to the specific components and the environment specifications only for that application to run can be given through Docker. And there are different, and that is just not enough. We need a system like Kubernetes to orchestrate those Docker containers into pods and make them scaling during the times of heavy loads.
All right. That's all I have.
Okay. All right. Let's talk about some database. You said you had both relational and non-relational database experience. Can you tell me what the core differences are between the two and why you would choose a non-relational database over a relational database?
Actually, see, relational and non-relational is something to say if two tables were there, if there is a strong relation between them, which we are building, that is something, a structure of the content is a completely schema based, then we call it as a SQL database, relational database. So it is a structured schema. It defines the tables, columns, and the relationship between the data entities, and 100% ACID principles to be followed is something what and we think about an SQL database. But when it comes to the NoSQL, it is entirely different. We cannot assure that complete ACID principles is being followed. And I take an example here. Cassandra is lacking at the consistency. And if they say near tunable consistency, but the consistency is a failure there. Likewise, there is no SQL database which completely follow all principles of ACID principles. And one more thing I say is the scalability, which will not be much good at sequential databases, but very strong at the NoSQL databases. And performance is also very good at NoSQL database. Availability also very good at the NoSQL database. And of course, these two actually provided by the sequential databases as well, but at a different stages there are hard breaks because of deadlocks and many other issues comes up with that. And most of the times the NoSQL databases goes for the immutable data sets. So NoSQLs are more stronger than SQL, but it is definitely comes to the use case of an application. My application is retrieving a large amount of data and my data will not be updated. I want to store the data within the time series time bounded. I go with a NoSQL. But I have a data which is metadata related. I have to push the data to the MySQL, sorry, to the browser to create the relation between the columns, tables, and all. I go with a NoSQL. So it is definitely related to the content and our use case. We have to go with a SQL or NoSQL.
Okay. All right. Let's focus on relational databases. In a table, can you tell me what the difference is between a primary key and an index?
Sorry?
A primary key and index, what the difference is?
See, basically, primary keys are something we see. They are unique and moreover, they are automatically indexed as well. But a column, if you make it index, it may not be completely unique and it can have duplicates as well. But why it is used for faster retrieval of data during the fetch, we'll be making them indexes. But and one more thing is primary key has uniquely defined the rows and enforced that entity integrity. I mean, you see the constraints like foreign keys and all these things comes with the help of these primary keys. And moreover, that uniqueness is something which we achieved with the primary, but not with the indexing. Indexing is basically for the purpose of faster retrieval, improves the query performance, and can be created on any columns. And you can create multiple columns as well to make it a single index. That can also be possible with the primary key. We call it as a composite, where in case of a indexing, we call it clustered indexes.
Okay. And there's a few different index types that we can apply to our index that will implement different search algorithms. Do you know what the default is, and maybe name another one that you could, an alternative?
Can you repeat the question? You're saying about some algorithms. I just want
Right.
to understand
So indexes apply different types of search algorithms to search the unique primary keys, right?
Yes.
Obviously, the standard is a hash, a key value hash, right? Which it will just use that key value to perform the search. Can you name another type of search index algorithm that we can apply to our indexes?
Sure. See, let me start with the default one, which is the bit index, is something the default one which we most of all the databases follow. And underlying that algorithm will be a balanced city structure to store the keys, and in the ordered state is what actually implemented. And there is a hashing indexing as well, which we can be implemented. The underlying data structure, it automatically says it is a hashing mechanism to store the key value pairs. And actually they compute a hash function and they index the columns to generate the hash value, which is used as an index into the particular. That's how an indexing hash index will be used. And there is something called bitmap index as well. And for that particular bitmap indexes represent this. There is a kind of distinct values in that index as well. These actually corresponds to the rows in the table. That's how it is. And I'm not very much have idea on the bitmap indexes. I just know this there is a use of it. And the I can say the other one is full text index as well. That is also more used. The underlying algorithm is basically it is designed for efficiently searching and retrieving the textual based data on the keywords or the phrases. The that works on the mechanism of tokenizing. That's what I can say about the full text index.
All right. Can you tell me what a stored procedure is, and maybe provide a use case that we would want to use a stored procedure in our database?
Sure. Basically, stored procedure is something which is used in the application for a specific reason, saying that I can say if you want to execute a series of commands and you want to implement some functionality to be updated internally itself, then you go with these stored procedures. And stored procedures are something which will be invoked by the any application, and after execution it returns a simple outputs to understand the state of that procedure execution. And there are different use cases for implementation. You can encapsulate your business logic with a database. That is one important step which you can do with the stored procedures. And you can have an improved performance as well because you retrieve the data into an application, you store it into the memory, you apply operations on it and reinsert it to the database. Of course, database operation is very costly. So such kind of things actually impact the performance. And if you have a large database intensive operations, it's always good to use the stored procedures. And security wise, it is very much important in terms going with the stored procedures because you have a strict access control and perfect data encryption associated with the security layers. And yeah, this is what I can say. And apart from that, there is a batch processing can also be achieved with the help of stored procedures.
Okay. All right, I think that's all the database questions I have. Alexis, do you have any follow-up database questions?
Yeah, I have a couple of them. You mentioned that the index is helping you to retrieve very quick the information from database, right? Then why we are not creating indexes for all the columns in the database? If we need to
there are problems as well.
Okay.
Sorry?
Yeah, go ahead.
There are few problems with the indexes as well because of the it actually increases the overhead because indexes consumes additional storage on your disk, and this index has a structural data as well, and it is increases the overall size of your database, and this overhead becomes more problem when you have large amount of tables and multiple indexes. That number of indexes growing, the problem of your application is also, also goes because while inserting the data, every time it tries to re-index the content, which actually affects your performance of our application. That is what I can say. And moreover, it is actually increase the query optimization as well because as you have used more indexes, the optimization also becomes some overhead because increase in the complexity, right? Your query optimization also comes down.
Okay. Can you explain the use of group by and having in an SQL query?
Group by is basically to group the content over a specific parameter. After grouping by, if you want to apply any kind of where conditions, you'll be using having.
Can you give us an example?
For example, if you have an employees and the department information, and if you want to group the employee strength by the department, you'll be using the grouping, and you'll be getting per department how many employees were present. And after that, if you want to check if the department strength is something like this, so strength is more than 100, then I use a having parameter and I get having a strength count greater than 100. Then only I'll be able to printing those particular as a result. In such cases, I go with having and group by.
Can you elaborate the SQL query, just high level, like select star?
Sorry, can you repeat?
Can you elaborate a little bit the SQL query?
Okay. You want me to tell the query exactly, or do you want to write it? Anything?
Yeah, simple query where you are using the having keyword and also the group by.
Okay. So for example, I have, let me write something like select department name, and the count of employee ID as the number of employees. So now I use from department table, and I'll use a kind of join. It will be better to go with the left join because I want to take only sub content. Go with the left join, left side, inner join or left join, which is more suitable to detect the content. I'll be working on the department ID, which is present in the department table, equal to the employees department ID. Then I'll be grouping by department ID because I have used these parameters in the select. So I use department ID or department name, whichever is most required. And then I will check, I'll return only if the department is having a count greater than. So I'll use the having count of employee ID greater than 0. That's how I'll be able to retrieve it.
Count employee ID.
Count of the same thing which I have used in the select, I'm using here as well.
Okay, no problem. You were talking about join, right? Can you explain what a join is and talk about the differences between a left join and inner join?
Sure. Basically, joins were of multiple types. Joins are specifically for a reason to join two different tables and get a meaningful content out of it. The prior step to this is like denormalization. So normalization is something we remove the data and make it at a different table. So we'll reduce the columns and make it more meaningful. So with the help of joins, we bit denormalize it, but we'll be getting only a meaningful content out of it with the help of types of joins. So inner join is something, if I want to use it right, it will return the rows where there is a match of both the tables based upon this join condition. The subset of table A and the table B will be returning as an output. Where left join is something, it will return all the rows, but from the left table, and the matched rows from the right table. If there is no match, null values are returned from the right table.
In a inner join, we can use just equals there, or we can use another different kind of operator.
I use like equals.
Not equal or sorry?
Equal.
But can we use another kind of operator there or just equal?
I mostly used equal. I never tried with other, in fact.
Yeah, no problem. That's all what I have, Trevor. Charles, do you have something on database side?
Database. Okay. All right. Looks like we have 15 minutes left. Alexis, you want to finish up with your UI questions, and we'll see where we're at after that. You're on mute. Alexis, you're on mute.
Sorry. Yeah. let us go with some high-level question about UI. You mentioned that you have some experience in React and Angular too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let us go with Angular too. What we call data binding in Angular?
Data binding is something, what we do is like binding the data between the front end with a HTML template to the object which is in the script. This is called data binding. So there are two ways of data binding. The change in the front end implies to the back end, and the change in the back end implies to the front end. We call it the two-way data binding. There is a one-way data binding as well. That means only the change in the back end will be changing something in the front end. This is what actually the one-way and the two-way data bindings. And this is also called one-way data binding, is also called string interpolation.
Okay, yeah. Interpolation is a one-way data binding. Yeah, correct. What are pipes in Angular? You know what are pipes?
Pipes are basically used for the concept of transforming that it's like the data which we have, we can convert it into a currency. These are very regular examples. Converting to uppercase kind of things, we'll be using this particular concept of pipes, and we can create our custom pipes as well.
Okay, what are services?
Services are basically used for a couple of reasons: to interchange the data between the two different systems, two different components. We can use the services. If it's a parent and child, we'll use input output. That's a different story again. And if you want to connect to the backend services like REST integrations and all, we'll be using the services.
Okay, do you know what the concept of lazy loading is?
Yeah, lazy loading is something which is something when we integrate it, then only that particular data will be achieved. This is at different layers. We use lazy loading at the Hibernate JPA. We can use at the front end applications as well.
Yeah, but which is the concept that? Sorry, can you repeat that? The explanation of what is lazy loading?
Lazy loading is something, for example, only on a specific demand, that specific component will be invoked. This is what actually the lazy loading is. This is actually improves the application performance as well.
Okay. And you know, this is a general one. What is a single page application?
Single page application in the sense, there are components which are present in a single application. They load dynamically, and behind that, data only being changed. Once the component is being established, HTML will be remain same, and underlying the data will be updated through the Ajax kind of systems. And there is a proper communication between, or routing happens between the two different systems. I mean, using the routing modules, and we have a proper state management, API-driven systems, and yeah, these were some important factors which happens behind. The supporting technologies would be like Angular and React, both supports the single page applications.
Yeah, I'm good, Trevor.
Okay. All right. Looks like we have a little bit of time left. We'll talk about some Maven questions. Can you tell me what a transitive dependency is in a POM file?
Sorry, which dependency?
Transitive?
Transitive dependency is something, the dependency which comes as part of a dependency what we have added. We may not directly add it, but it comes internal to it. The example would be like if I add a starter web, it brings Tomcat, integrated Tomcat as a dependency. That is the transitive dependency of the starter project.
Okay. And how would we manage the versions of a transitive dependency if we needed to specify that all of our direct dependencies use a specific version of the transitive dependency being brought in? How would we do that?
Under the specific dependency, first we should exclude the dependency from that, so that using the exclusions we can exclude that, and we add it externally into the dependencies list.
What if we didn't want to exclude it? What if we just wanted to force all of our direct dependencies to use, say, say we had two direct dependencies that bring in log4j, but the log4j versions are different. How can we force both of those direct dependencies to use log4j version 3.0?
Okay, that can be done with the help of the dependency management. Under the dependency management, when we add these dependencies, right, I think I still see by adding the exclusions is the way, but I really don't see any other direct way. Maybe I'm
Yep.
not very sure,
Dependency
but
management, that's what I was looking
dependency
for.
management, yeah.
Okay. And how would I generate a dependency tree if I wanted to see all of our dependencies within a project?
In the Maven, there is a command, a CLI command, the dependency tree. With the help of that, I'll be able to get the complete list under all transitive dependencies as well.
Okay. Alexis, do you have any Maven questions before we wrap it up?
No, I'm okay. Yeah, I'm good.
Okay, great. Charles, do you have any other questions before we turn it over?
No.
Okay. All right. All right, Mayor. That's all the questions that we have for you. Do you have any questions for us?
I'm really excited about this opportunity. I would like to know more about the team project. If you have something, it really helps me good.
So we are hiring candidates for our collections program. This is an existing application that we already support a few clients, but we're onboarding additional clients, and we need some additional staff to help with that effort. As far as the architecture goes, they're Spring Boot applications. They're hosted on Azure Red Hat OpenShift, which is Kubernetes based, and we use Docker images and deploy them dynamically using a Helm infrastructure. What else? The application also leverages a Postgres distributed database, which takes some of the principles of the NoSQL but applies it to our SQL database. Those are the core core things that you probably want to know about. Is there anything in particular that you'd like to know?
Nothing. That's really good. I'm really excited about this opportunity. I'm really waiting for your feedback too. Thank you so much.
Okay. Well, I appreciate the time to get to know you. It's been a pleasure. For next steps, just touch base with your recruiter and we can go from there.
It's my pleasure meeting you guys today. Thank you so much. I'll be waiting.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you. Have a good day. Bye.